27 nannies in 30 days, 27 dismissals, 27 times Eo Dong-sun, head of the Gumryong syndicate, had hired someone to keep his dying twins alive through the night, and 27 times they'd treated Minjun and Minji like chores instead of children. So he did what any mafia boss would do, installed high-definition cameras in every corner of the nursery, and watched every breath, every whimper, every person who entered his premature baby's room from his bulletproof office. Then the new caretaker walked in. Foreign woman, tired face, dark skin that made his security chief raise an eyebrow. She checked the twins' vitals, adjusted their blankets, sanitized her hands, and then she did something that made every man in his surveillance room freeze. She picked up the prescribed vitamin bottle, unscrewed the cap, sniffed it, and without hesitation, dumped the entire thing in the trash. His head of security reached for his phone. Dong-sun raised his hand. Wait. Trinity turned to the camera. Not past it. At it. And she spoke, her voice calm but cutting through the audio feed like a blade. Mr. Eo, whatever's in that bottle is making your babies sicker. You can storm in here and fire me like you did the others, or you can trust me for one night and see if I'm right. Dong-sun stood, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth hurt. No one touched his doctor's orders. No one disobeyed protocol. He was in the nursery in 45 seconds. The woman looked up, completely unbothered, a twin cradled against her chest, skin to skin. Are you going to stand there looking dangerous, or are you going to help me save your children? Hey there. You know that feeling when someone says the one thing you've been too afraid to admit, and it hits you like a freight train? Eo Dong-sun just heard a stranger tell him his own family might be poisoning his twins. Do you think Trinity just signed her death warrant, or gave him the wake-up call that'll save his children's lives? Drop your answer below, and subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. Let's go. The interview room smelled like leather and expensive cologne, the kind that probably cost more than Trinity's entire month's rent. Eo Dong-sun sat behind a desk that looked carved from a single piece of black marble, his suit so perfectly tailored it might as well have been armor. He didn't look up when she entered, didn't acknowledge her existence for a full 30 seconds while he signed something that probably decided someone's fate. Trinity stood there, her nursing school transcripts clutched in her sweating hands, and waited. When he finally looked up, his eyes were the coldest thing she'd ever seen. Not cruel, just empty. Like he'd already decided she was going to fail and was just going through the motions. You're the 6th applicant, he said in English, his accent crisp and precise. The others lasted between 3 days and 2 weeks. Why would you be any different? Trinity swallowed. The job posting had been vague. Live-in caretaker for premature twins. Medical background required. Competitive salary, but the moment she'd walked into this fortress of a penthouse, she'd understood what she was really applying for. This wasn't a job. This was a test. She was expected to fail. Because I actually need this job, Mr. Eo, she said, forcing her voice steady. The others probably had options. Safety nets. I don't. My father owes money to people who don't accept payment plans, and I'm 3 months from finishing my nursing degree. I need this salary, which means I need your children to survive. Our incentives are aligned. Something flickered in his expression. Not warmth. Maybe interest? The twins are premature, chronically ill. They require round-the-clock care and strict adherence to their medical protocol. No deviations, no personal judgment calls. You follow the schedule the doctors have provided, or, he paused, his gaze boring into her. Well, let's just say termination would be the least of your concerns. Trinity's heart hammered. She knew what he was. Everyone in Seoul knew the name Eo Dong-sun, even foreign students trying to keep their heads down. The Dragon of Seoul, the man who controlled half the underground and all of the fear. I understand, she said. Do you? He stood, walking around the desk with the fluid grace of a predator. The last caretaker was removed from the property in the middle of the night. The one before that left in tears before her first week was over. "This isn't a normal household, Miss Ryan. These aren't normal children. And his voice dropped. "I am not a normal employer." "Then it's a good thing I'm not looking for normal," Trinity said, meeting his eyes even though everything in her screamed to look away. "I'm looking for $20,000 a month and a chance to keep 2 babies alive. Can we agree on that?" For the first time, something almost like approval crossed his face. "You start tonight. 1 mistake, and you're gone. 2 mistakes." He let the sentence hang in the air like a noose. "There won't be a second mistake," Trinity said. She was lying. She just didn't know it yet. The nursery was beautiful in the way a museum was beautiful, sterile, expensive, untouchable. 2 state-of-the-art incubators sat like transparent cocoons in the center of the room, surrounded by monitors that beeped and hummed with mechanical precision. The walls were a soft gray, the lighting clinical. Everything was white or silver or glass. Nothing soft. Nothing warm. Trinity set down her bag and immediately started sanitizing hands first, then surfaces, then the equipment she'd be handling. Professional, methodical, confident. What she didn't see were the cameras. In his office, 3 rooms away, Eo Dong-sun settled into his leather chair and pressed a button on his desk. The wall of monitors flickered to life 12 screens, each showing a different angle of the nursery. Top corners, side walls, above the incubators. One positioned perfectly to capture Trinity's face. He poured 2 fingers of whiskey and leaned back, ready to watch her fail. The twins started crying almost immediately. Not the normal baby cry, the desperate, pained wail of infants who hurt in ways they couldn't explain. Minjun first, his tiny face scrunching red, then Minji joining in like a chorus of suffering. On screen, Trinity moved without hesitation. She checked their vitals, first temperatures, oxygen levels, heart rates all logged on the clipboard with quick, efficient notes. Then she picked up Minjun, supporting his fragile head with practiced ease, and brought him against her chest. Dong-sun leaned forward. The previous nannies would have left them crying, following the strict schedule that said feeding time wasn't for another hour. They would have stood there, uncomfortable and uncertain, waiting for the clock to give them permission. Trinity started humming, low and soft. She swayed slightly, that instinctive rocking motion, and Minjun's cries eased. Not stopped, but eased. She set him back down gently and picked up Minji, repeating the process. Check vitals. Hold close. Hum. Sway. Dong-sun took a drink. Maybe she'd last a week. Then Trinity walked to the medical station, where the carefully measured formula bottles sat in a precise row, each labeled with times and dosages. She picked up the 9 p.m. bottle, the one she was supposed to feed them in 15 minutes, and she opened it and smelled it. Dong-sun's glass paused halfway to his lips. She poured a tiny amount into a medicine cup, looked at it under the light. Then, and this, made Dong-sun sit up straight. She touched it to her tongue. Her face contorted. She spit immediately into the sink, rinsing her mouth once, twice, 3 times. Then Trinity Ryan did the unthinkable. She dumped the entire bottle down the drain. Then the next one. Then all 6 bottles lined up for the next 24 hours. Dong-sun's hand was on his phone before his brain caught up. His head of security answered on the first ring. "Remove her," Dong-sun started to say, but Trinity was already moving. She pulled something from her own bag, a thermos. She poured liquid into a clean bottle, tested the temperature on her wrist like she'd done this 1,000 times, and lifted Minjun into her arms. The baby latched onto the bottle instantly, desperately, like he'd been starving because he had been. Dong-sun's finger hovered over the call button. He should fire her. She'd directly disobeyed medical orders, destroyed prescribed formula, brought in unauthorized food. But Minjun was drinking. Actually drinking. Not the struggling, painful swallows the doctors said were normal for his condition. He was eating like a healthy baby for the first time in his 6 weeks of life. Trinity's voice came through the audio feed, soft and sure. "That's it, sweetheart. That's it. I know it tastes better. I know. Dong-sun ended the call without saying a word. He sat back in his chair, his heart pounding with something he couldn't name. What the hell was in that thermos? At 3 a.m., when the world was at its darkest and most honest, Dong-sun was still awake. He was always awake at 3 a.m. Sleep was a luxury for people who didn't have empires to protect and enemies circling like sharks. The monitors glowed blue in his darkened office. He'd been watching Trinity for 6 hours straight. She'd cleaned the nursery top to bottom, reorganized the medical supplies with a nurse's precision, and logged every vital sign with meticulous detail. She'd also, and this was what kept Dong-sun glued to his chair, played with his children, not in the perfunctory way the others had, bouncing them awkwardly when protocol demanded interaction time. Trinity talked to them. Actual conversations, like they could understand. She narrated everything she did. Now we're going to check your temperature, Minji. I know. The thermometer is cold. But look, it's over already. You're so brave. She touched them constantly. Gentle fingers on their cheeks, palm against their tiny chests to feel their breathing. That skin-to-skin contact the previous nannies had avoided, terrified of these fragile, expensive lives. At 3 a.m., both twins woke up crying. Trinity was on her feet before the second cry. She didn't turn on the harsh overhead lights, just a small lamp that cast everything in warm amber. She picked up both babies, one in each arm, and settled into the rocking chair the previous nannies had never touched. I know, she whispered. I know it hurts. I know you don't understand why. And then she started to sing. It wasn't a nursery rhyme. It wasn't a lullaby from a book. It was something deep and aching and real, a song that sounded like it came from the same place grief lived. Her voice was rich and textured, carrying weight that had nothing to do with technique and everything to do with survival. Hush now, sweet baby, don't you cry. Mama's gonna sing you a lullaby. The world is dark, but you're my light. I'll keep you safe through the longest night. The twins quieted, not immediately, slowly, like they were being pulled from pain into something softer. Minjun's tiny fist curled around her finger. Minji's breathing evened out. In his office, Eo Dong-sun felt something crack in his chest. He'd been watching strangers handle his children for weeks, watching them treat Minjun and Minji like problems to solve, diseases to manage, schedules to follow, watching them fail to see his children as anything more than sick babies who cried too much and demanded too much and would probably die anyway. But Trinity was singing to them like they mattered, like they were hers. Your mama's gone, but you're not alone. This stranger's heart will be your home. I'll fight the dark. I'll hold you tight. My borrowed babies. My guiding light. Tears hit the marble desk before Dong-sun realized he was crying. He pressed his hand to his mouth, trying to physically hold back the sound. The Dragon of Soul didn't cry. Couldn't cry. Had buried that weakness the day he'd buried his wife, 6 weeks and a lifetime ago. But here, alone in the blue glow of surveillance monitors, watching a foreign woman sing his dying children a song about borrowed love and desperate hope, Eo Dong-sun broke. Because Trinity was doing what he couldn't. She was being human with them. Present. Real. She was mothering them. On screen, Trinity stood slowly, still swaying, both babies asleep against her chest. She whispered something too soft for the audio to catch, but Dong-sun could read her lips. I've got you. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, feeling foolish and exposed even though he was alone. He shouldn't be this affected. She was an employee. They were a transaction. This was surveillance, not connection. But Minjun's face was peaceful for the first time in weeks, and Minji's oxygen levels had stabilized, and Trinity was singing about being a home for children who weren't hers, which was somehow the most selfless and most devastating thing Dong-sun had ever witnessed. He reached for the intercom button, then stopped. What would he say? Thank you for caring about my children when I've been too afraid to? Instead, he watched her settle the twins back into their incubators with infinite gentleness, watched her check their vitals one more time, watched her pull a chair between the two incubators and sit down like a guardian, her hand stretched out to touch both babies at once. She wasn't going to sleep. She was going to keep watch. Dong-sun poured another drink with shaking hands. The whiskey burned going down, but it didn't warm the cold place in his chest. Nothing had warmed that place since the delivery room, since the choice between his wife and his children, since the moment he'd become a father and a widower in the same breath. But watching Trinity, watching her treat his children like they deserved softness despite their circumstances, something was beginning to thaw. He should sleep. He should let his security team handle the overnight monitoring. He should stop watching this woman care for his children like it was the most important thing in the world. Instead, Dong-sun settled deeper into his chair and kept the monitors running. Just for tonight, he told himself. Just to make sure she was legitimate. Just to see if miracles still existed. Dong-sun entered the nursery at 6:47 a.m. without knocking. Trinity spun around from the changing table, her hands full of clean diaper and baby wipes, her face exhausted but alert. For a split second, fear flashed across her features. Then she straightened her spine and met his eyes. "Mr. Io," she said, her voice steady despite the fact that the most dangerous man in Seoul had just appeared like a ghost. "You're up early." He didn't respond. Couldn't. He was staring at Min-jun, who Trinity had just finished changing. His son was pink, not the grayish pale that had haunted Dong-sun's nightmares. Pink. Healthy pink. "I can explain about the formula," Trinity started, setting Min-jun back in the incubator with practiced efficiency. "I know I wasn't supposed to." Dong-sun crossed the room in 3 strides and placed his hand against Min-jun's forehead. Cool. Not the fever that had been constant for days. Cool and normal and alive. "What did you do?" His voice came out rougher than intended, Trinity's jaw set. "I stopped poisoning them." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Dong-sun's hand moved to Minji's incubator, checking her temperature the same way. Also cool. Also normal. "That formula was prescribed by the best pediatric specialists in Seoul," he said slowly. "Then your best pediatric specialists are either incompetent or on someone's payroll," Trinity shot back. She grabbed the trash can and pulled out one of the empty bottles she'd dumped. "Smell this. Actually smell it. Tell me that's normal formula." Dong-sun took the bottle, uncapped it. The scent hit him immediately, something acrid and wrong underneath the expected milk smell. "I noticed it the moment I walked in," Trinity continued, her words coming faster now, like a dam breaking. "The twins' symptoms, chronic inflammation, failure to gain weight, constant low-grade fever, those aren't typical preemie complications. Those are poisoning symptoms. Someone has been dosing that formula with something toxic. Not enough to kill them outright, but enough to keep them sick. Weak." Dong-sun's blood went cold. Not the ice of his reputation, the real thing, the kind that preceded violence. "You're sure?" "I'm 3 months from a nursing degree, Mr. Io. I've spent 2 years in pediatric rotations. I've seen dozens of premature babies, and yours were not failing to thrive. They were being systematically weakened." She crossed her arms. "Now you can fire me for disobeying your orders, or you can let me keep them alive. Your choice." Dong-sun really looked at her for the first time, not as an employee or a risk or a temporary solution. He looked at Trinity Ryan and saw someone who'd walked into his fortress, identified a threat he'd been blind to, and thrown away protocol to save his children, without backup, without permission, with nothing but her own conviction and a thermos of clean formula. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. It wasn't the question he meant to ask, but it was the only one that mattered. Because this woman wasn't supposed to exist, someone who would risk everything for children who weren't hers, who would look at a mafia boss and call his doctors incompetent, who would sing at 3 a.m. like love was enough to keep babies breathing. Trinity blinked, surprised by the question. "I'm nobody. I'm just a student who needs money." "No," Dong-sun said, moving closer. Too close. Close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, the exhaustion bruising her skin, the fierce protectiveness in the set of her jaw. "You're not nobody. Nobody doesn't risk their life to save strangers. Nobody doesn't throw away a medical protocol without backup. Nobody doesn't sing like their heart is breaking." Her breath caught. "You heard that? I see everything that happens in this room," Dong-sun admitted, his voice low. "I've been watching you all night." He expected anger, violation. Instead, Trinity's expression shifted into something almost like understanding. "Good," she said. "Then you saw me save your children. And you know I'm telling the truth about that formula." Dong-sun's hand was still on Minji's incubator. His daughter, his fragile, perfect daughter who was supposed to be dying but was instead sleeping peacefully with normal vitals for the first time in her short life. "Keep them alive," he said, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't name. "Whatever you need, whatever it costs, keep them alive, and I'll keep you safe." Safe from what? Dong-sun looked at her, this brave, reckless woman who'd stumbled into a war she didn't understand. From whoever is trying to kill them. The weight of those words settled between them like a promise and a threat. Trinity's hand moved unconsciously to Minjun's incubator, protective and sure. "They'll have to go through me first." And despite everything, despite the danger, despite the cameras, despite the impossibility of this moment, Eo Dong-sun believed her. The dragon of soul, who trusted no one, who loved nothing but power and control, believed this exhausted foreign student would die before she let his children be harmed. It should have been just another transaction, another employee following orders for a paycheck. But when Trinity's eyes met his, defiant and exhausted and absolutely unshakable, Dong-sun realized with terrifying clarity that nothing about this woman was transactional, and nothing about what he was beginning to feel was safe. Trinity didn't find the proof by accident. She found it because she was looking. 3 days after Dong-sun had given her carte blanche to keep the twins alive, she was in the medical supply room doing inventory when she noticed something odd. The vitamin supplement bottles, the ones the private doctor had prescribed for the twins' immune support, had a faint residue around the cap threads. White and crystalline, like someone had mixed powder with liquid and hadn't wiped clean. She opened a fresh bottle and poured a small amount onto a glass slide, the way she'd been taught in toxicology class. Under the nursery's bright examination light, she could see particles that didn't belong, sediment that separated from the liquid, a film that caught the light wrong. Her hands started shaking. This wasn't contamination. This was deliberate. Trinity's mind raced through possibilities, dosage calculations, symptom timelines, the twins' improvement since she'd stopped the formula. Someone had been slow poisoning Minjun and Minji. Not enough to trigger immediate alarms, but enough to keep them perpetually ill, enough to make Dong-sun desperate and distracted, enough to make him weak. She had to tell him. Right now, before whoever was behind this realized the twins were getting better, Trinity grabbed the bottle and headed for Dong-sun's office, her heart hammering. The penthouse was a maze of marble hallways and closed doors, but she'd learned the layout. 3rd corridor, last door on the... "Miss Ryan," the voice stopped her cold. Trinity turned to find an elegant woman in her 50s standing in the hallway, perfectly coiffed, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Trinity's college tuition. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were calculating. "Mrs. Eo," Trinity said, recognizing Dong-sun's stepmother from the family photos in the main sitting room. "I was just looking for my stepson?" The woman's smile didn't waver. "He's in a meeting. Perhaps I can help you with something." Trinity's instincts screamed wrong. Everything about this woman's posture, her tone, the way she'd appeared at exactly the wrong moment wrong. "It's nothing urgent," Trinity lied, sliding the vitamin bottle behind her back. "I'll catch him later." "Oh, but you look so distressed." Mrs. Eo stepped closer, her heels clicking on marble. "Is it about the twins? Are they having another episode?" "No, they're fine. Better than fine, actually. They're..." Trinity stopped. The way Mrs. Eo's expression shifted just for a microsecond told her everything she needed to know. The twins getting better wasn't good news to this woman. It was a problem. That's wonderful to hear, Mrs. Eo said smoothly. You know, Dong-sun has been through so much. The loss of his wife, these sickly children. It's been hard watching him suffer. But you seem to be bringing light back into this household. She moved closer, invading Trinity's space with practiced ease. Of course, foreign workers can be so vulnerable here in Korea. Visa issues, work permits, immigration complications. Her voice dropped to something almost sympathetic. It would be terrible if someone were to report irregularities. The authorities can be so unforgiving, especially to young women working in sensitive households. Trinity's blood went cold. I'm not doing anything illegal, she said, but her voice came out weaker than intended. Of course not, but paperwork can be so confusing, can't it? And Dong-sun has many enemies who would love to cause problems for anyone close to him, including you. Mrs. Eo's hand landed on Trinity's shoulder, gentle and threatening all at once. My advice? Keep your head down, take care of the babies, don't ask questions. And certainly don't go bothering Dong-sun with concerns about medical supplies. The doctors know what they're doing. The threat was crystal clear. Trinity nodded slowly, her mind racing. She couldn't go to Dong-sun, not directly, not while this woman was watching. And if Mrs. Eo was willing to threaten her this openly, it meant she had power, resources, the ability to make Trinity disappear. I understand, Trinity said quietly. Good girl. Mrs. Eo patted her shoulder once more, then glided away down the hallway, leaving Trinity standing there with a bottle of poison in her hand and nowhere safe to turn. The danger wasn't outside the family. It was inside. Trinity spent the next 2 days turning the nursery into a fortress. She threw out every medical supply she hadn't personally verified. She started bringing in her own formula ingredients, mixing bottles in front of the cameras so Dong-sun could see exactly what went into his children's food. She washed and re-washed every surface, every blanket, every toy, like she could scrub away the invisible threat, and she stopped sleeping. How could she sleep when Mrs. Eo could walk in at any moment, when the private doctor could show up with a new prescription? When the twins' improvement was a ticking clock that would eventually force the poisoner's hand, on the monitors in his office, Dong-sun watched Trinity unravel. She was afraid. He could see it in the way she checked the door every few minutes, the way she positioned herself between the incubators and the entrance, defensive and ready, the way she'd stopped leaving the nursery except for bathroom breaks, like she didn't trust the twins to be alone for even 5 minutes. Something had happened. Someone had threatened her. Dong-sun knew the signs of intimidation, as well as he knew his own reflection. Trinity had been confident, almost reckless, in her defiance of protocol. Now she was terrified, but still there, still protecting his children despite whatever threat had been made. He could confront her, demand answers, use his authority to force the truth, or he could protect her the only way he knew how. At 11 p.m. that night, Dong-sun moved a leather armchair from his study into the hallway directly outside the nursery door. He settled into it with a book he had no intention of reading, and waited. At 11:17, Trinity opened the nursery door, probably for her usual hallway patrol. She froze when she saw him. Mr. Eo, she said, her voice tight with surprise. Is something wrong? No, Dong-sun said calmly, not looking up from his book. Go back to the twins. But I'll be here all night, he interrupted. So will I tomorrow night, and the night after. No one enters that nursery without going through me first. Is that understood? Trinity's eyes filled with tears so suddenly it caught them both off guard. She pressed a hand to her mouth, clearly trying to hold it together. You don't have to do that, she whispered. Yes, Dong-sun said, finally meeting her gaze. I do. Because whoever had scared her was going to have to kill him to get to those babies. And killing the head of the Gumryong syndicate wasn't something you did quietly or without consequence. Trinity nodded once, unable to speak, and retreated back into the nursery. Dong-sun settled deeper into his chair and pulled the knife from his ankle holster, resting it casually on the armrest where anyone approaching would see it. Let them come. The power went out at 2:37 a.m., during the worst thunderstorm Seoul had seen in 5 years. Not flickered. Cut. Completely and absolutely, the kind of coordinated outage that didn't happen by accident. Dong-sun was on his feet before the emergency lights activated, his hand already on his gun. The electronic locks on the penthouse doors disengaged with a series of soft clicks that might as well have been death knells. Inside the nursery, machinery started screaming. The twins' monitors, their oxygen support, the climate control keeping their environment stable, everything ran on power. The backup generators should have kicked in within seconds. They didn't. Trinity's voice came through the door, high and panicked. "Mr. Eo." The machines. Dong-sun slammed through the nursery door just as the thunder cracked overhead, lightning illuminating Trinity's terrified face. The twins were wailing, their cries mixing with the alarm systems dying one by one. "Get them out of the incubators," Dong-sun ordered, his mind already running through scenarios. Compromised generators, disabled security, perfect storm conditions for an assault. Keep them warm, keep them breathing. What's happening? "We're under attack." He pulled a second gun from his back holster and pressed it into her shaking hands. "Lock this door behind me. The deadbolt doesn't need power. Open it for no one but me. No one. I don't care what they say, what they sound like, what they threaten. You understand?" Trinity took the gun, her nursing training warring with her survival instinct. "I don't know how to..." "Point and squeeze. It will do the rest." He grabbed her face between his hands, forcing her to focus on him instead of the chaos. "Keep my children alive, Trinity. That's all I need you to do." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Dong-sun kissed her forehead hard and quick and desperate, then shoved her back toward the twins. "Lock it. Now." He slammed the door behind him. Heard the deadbolt slide home. Then he turned to face the hallway where shadows were already moving. 4 men, professional, armed, moving with the coordinated precision of trained killers. His own security detail. Bought. Compromised. Turned. Dong-sun smiled, and it was the smile that had earned him his reputation. The one that said, death was coming, and it wouldn't be his. "Gentlemen," he said, raising his gun, "you've made a terrible mistake." The first man died before he could respond. Inside the nursery, Trinity was living through a nightmare. The twins were in her arms, one against each shoulder, but without the incubator's controlled environment, they were starting to struggle. Minjun's breathing was already labored. Minji felt too warm, her fragile system overloading from the stress. Trinity laid them on the floor, on the soft playmat, her mind racing through emergency protocols. No power meant no suction equipment, no oxygen support, no monitors to tell her if they were crashing. She had her hands, her training, her breath. It would have to be enough. Outside, she heard gunfire. Close. Too close. The sounds of men fighting, furniture breaking, someone's choked-off scream. The twins started crying harder, feeding off her fear. "It's okay," Trinity lied, checking their airways, feeling for their pulses with trembling fingers. "Mama's here. Mama's got you." Except she wasn't their mama. She was just a broke nursing student who'd walked into something far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. And now she was locked in a room with 2 dying babies while their father fought a war just outside the door. Minjun's lips were turning blue. "No," Trinity gasped. "No, no, no. Come on, baby. Breathe." She tilted his head back, checked his airway clear, and started rescue breathing. Tiny puffs of air into his tiny lungs. 1 breath every 3 seconds. Her fingers on his chest, feeling for the rise and fall. Minji started wheezing. Trinity's training screamed at her. "You can't split your attention. You can't save 2 critical patients alone. Choose." "No," she said out loud. "Absolutely not." She grabbed Minji, positioned her next to Minjun, and started alternating. "Breathe for Minjun. Count 3. Breathe for Minji. Count 3. Check pulses. Check airways. Breathe. 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 Her vision started to blur from hyperventilating. Her back screamed from the awkward position. Her hands shook so badly she could barely maintain the head tilts. Outside, something heavy hit the nursery door. The wood cracked but held. Lock the door. Open it for no one but me. Trinity kept breathing for the babies, kept counting, kept praying to every god she'd ever heard of that Dong's son would survive, that the door would hold, that her breath would be enough. Another impact on the door. The hinges groaned. Minjun gasped, his little chest finally moving on its own. Trinity sobbed with relief and shifted full attention to Minji, who was still struggling. Come on, Minji. Come on, sweetheart. Fight. Your daddy is fighting for you out there. You fight too. The door splintered. Trinity grabbed the gun Dong-sun had given her other hand still on Minji's chest. She didn't know if she could actually shoot someone, didn't know if she could take a life, but she knew with absolute certainty that she would die before she let anyone hurt these babies. The door burst open. Trinity raised the gun, her hand shaking, her finger on the trigger. Dong-sun stumbled through, covered in blood, his suit torn, his face a mask of violence and exhaustion. He looked like something out of a nightmare. Except he was her nightmare, her monster, the thing standing between her and death. "It's me," he gasped, kicking the broken door shut behind him. "Trinity, it's me." She lowered the gun with a sob and turned back to Minji. "She's not breathing right. I can't, I need—" Dong-sun dropped to his knees beside them, his bloody hands hovering uselessly over his daughter. "What do you need?" "Light. I need to see. And I need you to hold her airway open while I breathe." He pulled out his phone, cracked screen but still working, and activated the flashlight. Trinity positioned Minji's head, and Dong-sun's hands, surprisingly gentle despite their violence, held the position while Trinity breathed life into his daughter's lungs. 1 breath. 2. 3. Minji coughed, then whimpered, then cried that beautiful, angry sound of a baby who was alive and offended about it. Trinity collapsed backward, her whole body shaking. "They're okay. They're both okay." Dong-sun pulled all 3 of them against his chest, heedless of the blood, the fear, the fact that he was probably crushing his children. He was crying again, tears cutting tracks through the blood on his face. "You saved them," he choked out. "You saved my children." "We saved them," Trinity corrected, her face pressed against his shoulder. "We're in this together now." And despite the destruction, despite the bodies in his hallway, despite everything that had just happened, Eo Dong-sun felt something he hadn't felt since his wife died. Hope. The sun rose on a different world. The penthouse was a crime scene, secured by what remained of Dong-sun's loyal security. The police had been called the ones on his payroll who understood that some justice happened outside official channels. The twins had been checked by a real doctor. One Dong-sun had personally vetted, and declared miraculously healthy despite their ordeal, and Mrs. Eo had disappeared. Trinity didn't ask what happened to her, didn't want to know. Some things were better left in the shadows where the Dragon of Soul operated. What mattered was that the threat was gone. The poisoning had stopped. The twins were thriving. 3 weeks had passed since that first night when Trinity entered the nursery to find Dong-sun already there, sitting in the rocking chair with both twins asleep against his chest. He was reading to them from a book of Korean folk tales, his voice soft and sure. "You're early," Trinity said, smiling despite herself. "I've been thinking," Dong-sun said, not looking up from the book, "about your employment contract." Trinity's heart sank. After everything, he was going to fire her? "Mr. Eo, if this is about—" "I burned it," he interrupted. "This morning. Took it out to the garden and set it on fire." She stared at him. "You... what?" Dong-sun finally looked up, his eyes clear and certain in a way she'd never seen. "I don't want an employee. I don't want a nanny or a nurse or someone who's here because I'm paying them." He stood slowly, adjusting the twins so they stayed asleep against his shoulders, and crossed to where Trinity stood, frozen in the doorway. "I want a partner," he said quietly. A mother for my children. A woman who would breathe life into them when machines failed. Who would stand between them and death, with nothing but courage and a gun she didn't know how to use. He shifted Minjun to one arm and pulled something from his pocket with the other. A ring, simple, elegant, with a stone that caught the morning light. I want you, Trinity Ryan. Not as an employee. As my equal. As my family. Trinity's hand flew to her mouth. You're insane. You barely know me. This is insane? Dongsun smiled, and it was nothing like the cold expressions she'd seen in their first interview. This was warm, real. I've watched you every day since you arrived. I've seen you at your worst and your best. I've watched you love my children when you had no reason to. I've seen you face death rather than abandon them. He stepped closer. I know everything that matters. I'm a broke nursing student with a criminal father and no family, Trinity said, tears streaming down her face. I'm nobody. You're the woman who saved my children's lives, Dongsun countered. You're the woman who sang to them at 3 a.m. like they were yours. You're the woman who stood in front of a broken door with a gun in your hand, ready to die. His voice cracked. You're the woman who taught me how to be human again. Trinity looked at the ring. At the twins sleeping peacefully. At this man who'd gone from terrifying stranger to something else. Something impossible and real and right. I don't know how to be a mafia boss's wife, she whispered. I don't know how to be a good husband, Dongsun admitted. But I know how to protect what's mine. And you, he pressed the ring into her hand. You and the twins are mine now. If you'll have us. Trinity looked down at Minji, who'd woken up and was staring at her with those wide, trusting eyes. Then at Minjun, who made a soft gurgling sound that might have been approval. They need a mother, Dongsun said softly. And I need you. Trinity took the ring with shaking hands. This is crazy. Yes, this is too fast. Yes, this is going to be dangerous. Yes, Dongsun said. But you've already survived the worst. Everything else is just life. Trinity slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, like someone had known her measurements. Like this had been inevitable from the moment she'd walked into that nursery and refused to let these babies die. Okay, she breathed. Okay, yes. Dongsun kissed her then, careful not to crush the babies between them, and it tasted like hope and new beginnings, and the kind of love that survives surveillance cameras and poisoned formula and everything the world can throw at it. When they pulled apart, Minji started crying, not in pain, but in that demanding way that meant she wanted attention right now. Trinity laughed through her tears and took the baby from Dongsun's arms. Come here, sweetheart. Let me tell you about the day I met your daddy and he threatened to kill me. I didn't threaten to kill you, Dongsun protested. You absolutely did. I implied termination of employment. That's the same thing in your world. They bickered like that all morning, passing the twins back and forth, existing in the nursery that was no longer a fishbowl but a home. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warm and golden, nothing like the cold blue glow of surveillance monitors. Dongsun had dismantled most of the cameras, kept just 2, for safety, positioned where Trinity could see them and wave when she wanted him to come in, because he didn't need to watch from a distance anymore. He was finally part of the picture. That afternoon, while the twins napped, Dongsun pulled Trinity onto the couch beside him. Tell me about your father's debts, he said quietly. The ones you took this job to pay off, Trinity tensed. You don't have to. I want to. He laced his fingers through hers. We're family now. Your problems are my problems. And unlike you, I have resources to make problems disappear. I don't want to owe you. You don't owe me anything, Dongsun said firmly. You saved my children. I could give you everything I own and still be in your debt. He kissed her knuckles. Let me help. Let me take care of you the way you've taken care of us. Trinity leaned against his shoulder, feeling the weight of weeks of terror finally lifting. His name is Marcus Ryan. He borrowed money from the wrong people in Chicago. $50,000. Consider it paid, Dong-sun said simply. And Trinity? If he ever comes to Korea looking for more money, I'll handle it. You're protected now. Completely. She should have been uncomfortable with how easily he talked about money and violence and protection. But this was who he was, the Dragon of Soul, a man who solved problems with power and resources and absolute conviction. And he'd chosen to use all of that to protect her. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Dong-sun countered. For staying, for fighting, for loving them. I do love them, Trinity realized, looking at the sleeping twins. I loved them before I knew I was allowed to. Then it's perfect, Dong-sun said, pulling her closer, because they've been yours from the moment you dumped that poisoned formula down the drain. They sat like that until the twins woke up crying, until life demanded they move, until the next feeding and the next diaper change and the next small crisis that made up the beautiful, ordinary chaos of parenthood. But this time, they faced it together. No surveillance, no distance, no fear, just a family that had been forged in fire and blood and fierce, impossible love. And in the nursery where it had all begun, sunlight touched the empty incubators that would soon be donated to children who needed them. The monitors were silent, the cameras mostly gone. But on the wall, in a frame made of silver, hung a single screenshot from that first night, Trinity singing at 3 a.m., both twins in her arms, her face exhausted and determined and full of the kind of love that saves lives. And beneath it, in Dong-sun's precise handwriting, the night our family began.